Does the Pakistan-Saudi defense agreement also mean that Saudi Arabia has become, indirectly, a nuclear power? After two incidents, Saudi rulers began asking whether the American security umbrella is solid or full of holes. Saudi Arabia's excellent fleet of 283 fighter jets, are those American or were they bought from American allies? So can Pakistani pilots legally fly them in combat? The same countries that, just 4 months and 10 days ago, were telling Pakistan not to respond to Indian attacks are now signing security agreements with Pakistan. Like Qatar, Saudi Arabia never had a mutual defense pact with the United States. There were only legal frameworks. If Donald Trump had understood how much long-term damage attacks on Qatar could do to U.S. interests, maybe those attacks would not have been carried out. 61 days after his meeting with the Saudi king, that American president was found dead in his bedroom. He had given two guarantees. One question every Pakistani Democrat should ask is this: is this agreement strictly about defense, or will defense become a cover for adventures too? How are you all doing? September 17th will be marked in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia's history as an important day. The Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement signed that day is the kind of pact that has happened only a handful of times in the world, and in 90% of those cases, the United States is party to them. In other words, they are alliances that include the United States. If you take the US out, mutual defense pacts of this kind exist in very few countries. Even those are usually under one large umbrella. Take the Germany-France Joint Security Pact. An attack on one is treated as an attack on both, but both are under NATO's umbrella. So anyway, instead of repeating the entire Pakistan-Saudi agreement that you already know by now, I'll point out a few key items and then give our point of view and answer the questions on your mind. First, the agreement says that if an external enemy attacks either Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, it will be considered an attack on both, and both countries are jointly bound to respond. That is a binding agreement. It is like invoking NATO's Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. What will this look like on the ground? We need to see details. We need more discussion and the text of the agreement itself. The catch is that one country is militarily powerful, while the other is not. One is an economic power, the other is a military power. How will this partnership actually work? According to the agreement, the two countries will share intelligence and cooperate on defense industry projects and new weapons production. That benefits both, but it benefits Pakistan more. Since 1971, whenever India has shown aggression against Pakistan, Israel had often supported India. After this pact, it will be easier for Pakistan to watch Israeli movements from Saudi territory than from inside Pakistan, because Israel's bases in the Negev desert are less than 200 miles from western Saudi Arabia. Some bases are only 30 to 40 kilometers from Saudi coasts by sea, and overflight distances are often under 250 kilometers. From Saudi soil, it will be easier for Pakistan to monitor any joint operations by India and Israel that might target Pakistani nuclear facilities. That matters because the constant fear has been that India and Israel could coordinate to roll back or destroy Pakistan's nuclear capability. If that ever happens, and God forbid, it would likely be done in a way that prevents Pakistan from mounting a unified command and response. If such an operation occurred, it would be very hard for Pakistan to retaliate directly against Israel because Pakistan does not possess ICBMs with ranges that reach Israel's eastern border. But if Pakistan has a mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia, then a joint defense arrangement could make a Pakistani response much more feasible. Saudi Arabia's western areas are near Israel, and Saudi territory could serve as a base from which Pakistan would have more options. I must stress, we do not want any military adventurism. But if a serious aggression occurred from Israel, Pakistan's choices would be limited to retaliate or accept defeat. With Saudi cooperation, Pakistan would gain added options because of Saudi soil and logistics. The agreement also says Pakistan and Saudi Arabia will cooperate in defense industry production. That is especially in Pakistan's interest because Pakistan is already co-developing modern fighters, surveillance systems, and combat drones with China, and cooperating with Turkey. Saudi investment will accelerate production and acquisition. Pakistan largely imports weapons from China. Modern warfare also includes cyber and space security. So this deal is a full-spectrum agreement that includes diplomacy. Third practical point, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia will coordinate logistics, military movements, and supply lines. They will mutually use military facilities and bases, and aircraft and equipment will be available for mutual use when needed. The agreement does not spell every word out, but news coming from Saudi officials to Reuters and Middle East Eye suggests this is the practical direction. Any genuine mutual defense pact is meaningless unless partners can use each other's facilities. Think about it. What use is a pact if either country cannot access the other's bases and equipment? After this agreement, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia will surely ramp up military exercises so that mutual defense can be practiced and logistics aligned. Expect fast response mechanisms and additional sub-agreements to be signed in the coming months. Many of these sub-agreements might not be public. Still, enough will leak that the public will know they exist. I believe these matters should be public because Pakistanis deserve to know the broad framework. Fourth, a major question is whether Saudi oil wealth will translate into Pakistan, providing any nuclear umbrella or nuclear security for Saudi Arabia. Nothing in the agreement explicitly says so, but both sides know that this pact would not have been possible if Pakistan were not a nuclear power. So even if the SMDA does not say it in so many words, authors and reporters pressed an unnamed Saudi official about nuclear cooperation, and were told this is a comprehensive, all-encompassing agreement that covers many military matters. That suggests an understanding could exist beneath the surface. However, transferring nuclear weapons from one country to another is legally and politically fraught, and operationally extremely dangerous. Nuclear weapons cannot be handed over like boxed goods to a friend with the instruction, open and use if needed. Control and command, security codes, storage and launch protocols are intricate. No two countries have ever trusted each other so completely as to openly transfer nuclear weapons. Pakistan, for its part, is not a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, while Saudi Arabia is. The world order has moved from order to disorder, especially after Donald Trump shredded many international norms. It is possible that in the future, some arrangement could be devised in which, if Saudi Arabia faced a major threat, Pakistan might be asked to invoke a nuclear option. That is possible in theory, but it is not publicly on the table now. A related and urgent question in Pakistan is that Saudi Arabia has 283 fighter jets, which Pakistani pilots and trainers operate and train on inside Saudi Arabia. In a combat situation, once those jets are armed with missiles, can Pakistani pilots legally fly them in combat? The agreement commits both states to joint mutual defense. Saudi reporting describes the deal as comprehensive, but legally, many of those jets were purchased under political and security restrictions from the U.S. Modern fighters are not just airframes and engines. They are complex packages of software, sensitive avionics, integrated weapons systems, and networked links. Much of the control remains with the original manufacturer. Access to radios and encrypted communications can be controlled by the supplier, even while the aircraft are in another country. To give Saudi jets full operational autonomy, Saudi Arabia would need legal agreements from the manufacturer and the supplier country. In practice, such permission is extremely difficult to obtain and almost never granted. That is the legal position. From the Pakistan-Saudi angle, Saudi moves were driven by the Qatar attacks. Saudi actions were taken because of those attacks. No U.S. administration will gladly allow its systems to be used against its ally Israel. The U.S. will not allow its equipment to be used against Israel. So even if Pakistan wants to use Saudi aircraft in combat against Israel, the U.S. would likely block that. Another question is, if India and Pakistan go to war again, as Prime Minister Modi once suggested, operations are ongoing, how will Saudi Arabia help Pakistan, especially given Saudi Arabia's strong economic ties with India? Saudi officials have said their deal with Pakistan will not harm relations with India. Many people rightly ask, how will Saudi Arabia stand with Pakistan in a Pakistan-India war? Looking at the agreement's second section, there is a line saying both countries will develop aspects of defense cooperation. These lines are there to allow flexibility. It is still an open question how Saudi Arabia will respond if actual conflict breaks out between India and Pakistan. Saudi Arabia could supply Pakistan with oil, impose economic sanctions on India, and invest in Pakistan's missile programs for the long term. These practical forms of support could arrive in time, but Saudi Arabia will be cautious not to break its economic ties with India, so diplomacy will likely be exercised before any escalation. Fifth point, the agreement also covers maritime areas between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. There are several seas involved: the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, and the wider Indian Ocean. Because the Pact promises comprehensive mutual security cooperation, maritime surveillance and protection of Saudi oil routes, and new petroleum infrastructure will be important. Saudi oil routes face threats from Yemeni groups, Israeli actions, and piracy. Saudi petrodollars can fund new levels of marine surveillance and security. New maritime patrol planes and submarines could be built or purchased jointly. Sixth, note that this is the start of a non-trivial agreement. Many political issues remain to be worked out. Saudi Arabia must discuss details with Gulf states and secure supporting agreements. Saudi cannot take steps of this magnitude without consultation with close allies. Pakistan will also need some parliamentary approvals and modifications to command and control structures. Pakistan's Navy, Air Force, and Army will need to add new protocols. Meetings and training exercises will be necessary to see how this works in practice. Pakistan will also need to decide how many forces it can spare for mutual defense and whether the two countries will create a joint command like NATO's. If they do, who will lead it and what will its limitations be? Right now, some 10,000 Pakistani soldiers are already in Saudi Arabia for various purposes. Finally, a set of critical questions arise. This is an agreement that will shake the region. In coming years, you will hear SMDA mentioned frequently. On September 14th to 15th, a summit of 57 Muslim and Arab countries in Doha failed. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said little then, but 2 days later he signed this pact that changed South Asia and the Arab world's power dynamics. This is a paradigm shift. If the United States forced Saudi Arabia into this deal, Saudi did not sign happily. In 1945, Saudi ruler Abdulaziz ibn Saud signed an oil for security understanding with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt aboard a cruiser in the Suez. That picture became the bedrock of U.S.-Saudi relations. Roosevelt gave assurances that Saudi soil would not be used to undermine an Arab state. 61 days later, Roosevelt died in his bedroom. His vice president, who became president, recognized Israel first among the new post-war nations. Over decades, Saudi-US understandings changed. But fast forward to 2019. The Abqaiq and Quraysh attacks, Yemeni rebel strikes, hit Saudi oil processing and temporarily cut about 5.7 million barrels per day, roughly 50% of Saudi production and about 6% of global demand. Oil prices spiked. The Houthis claimed responsibility quickly. Saudi defenses looked exposed. That incident triggered a rethink in Riyadh. Is the American umbrella a true shield or a sieve? Thinking started changing. Still, the Saudis did not want to abandon the US. Talks about a Japan-style pact with the United States surfaced in 2023 and 2024. The idea was to give Saudi a security guarantee like Japan's. An attack on Saudi would be treated as an attack on the United States. But the price involved political conditions that the Saudis found unacceptable. Limits on Saudi policy toward Israel and constraints on military cooperation with China. The US also proposed nuclear cooperation under heavy US monitoring. Crown Prince MBS rejected those conditions as compromising Saudi autonomy. When the Gaza war began and the US supported Israel, MBS faced a political dilemma. Publicly aligning with Israel would destroy his image in the Muslim world. That reinforced Saudi's search for alternatives such as China and Pakistan. China will not offer a US-style security guarantee. Pakistan remained a historic partner. After the brief India-Pakistan clash in May, when Pakistan shot down 6 Indian aircraft, Saudi trust in Pakistan increased and negotiations accelerated. The September 9th attacks in Doha, the Israeli-American attacks, accelerated matters further. The SMDA is the result of those shifts. What will India's problem be? India should be a bit worried. Pakistan's security calculus now must account for an additional protective layer. Any plan to strike Pakistan will have to consider Saudi involvement. Diplomatically and practically, India will need to reassess its planning. Will Israel and the US be worried? Certainly. I predict statements will come from Washington and Jerusalem raising questions about this cooperation. It is likely some US official will publicly express concern. If Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Saudi representatives meet in New York, we may see high-level exchanges about this pact. The US response will matter. But will US pressure make Saudi and Pakistan back down? My reading is no, both countries carefully considered this. The shift they chose is unlikely to be reversed. One more angle. The Arabs have shifted their benchmark for security away from Iran and toward Israel, even if they will not say it openly. Saudi officials have acknowledged in interviews that the pact responds to the operational reality of Israeli and American joint operations. For Pakistanis, the most important point is this: Democrats should insist that this agreement be debated in parliament and that it remain limited to defense. If Saudi governance changes or current leadership becomes adventurous, do we want Pakistan to be drawn into aggression? Pakistan should not participate in offensive actions that target vulnerable civilians or non-combatants. Human rights advocates must insist on those limits. In short, Pakistanis and Democrats must demand parliamentary oversight and public transparency. The details matter because Pakistan's involvement in another country's offensive would be a moral and strategic disaster. Thank you.